Hello, I'm Bishop Keith, and it's lovely to welcome you to my reflection for ANZAC Day this year. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for continuing to watch my videos. It's very encouraging. In 1915, on the 25th of April, members of the Australian New Zealand Army Corps came ashore in the Gallipoli campaign. For Australia, it was the first time that we had really been tested as a young nation. We were a nation of 5 million people at that time, and during the whole of the First World War, we would lose 60,000 service personnel. This is a terrible blight for our nation. How many politicians, how many artists, how many poets, how many musicians did we lose because of humankind's inhumanity to humankind? It was a terrible war, and some 60 million people, I believe, lost their lives, both civilian and in service personnel on both sides of the conflict. A terrible, terrible blight on our human nature. For me, it has a special memory. It has special meaning also, because on that day in 1915, my great uncle Harold came ashore also. He was a Gallipoli veteran. He fought during the whole campaign, with the exception of the last couple of months, because he was wounded. He was repatriated back to Egypt to recover, and then to the UK to continue to heal from his wounds. When he had recovered, he was sent to France, and he found himself in a little town called Pozières. In 1916, the British opened the huge front of the Somme campaign, which was supposed to be the final push for victory. It was a terrible campaign, and the Australian troops fought very, very bravely in that campaign in Pozières, and my uncle Harold was one of them. Sometime during that campaign, towards the end, Uncle Harold, who was part of the 10th Battalion South Australian Battalion, was involved in a push towards a little farmhouse called Mouquet Farm. It was in about the 5th week of the 6-week campaign, and Uncle Harold finally met his end as he was killed in action. His body was never recovered. His death caused a huge disruption to my mother's side of the family. Uncle Harold is on mum's side of the family. It was a great grief to his mother and to all of the family, and he was hardly ever spoken of in the family. His story and his death and the ramifications of his death, I have no doubt, caused similar ripples through many other thousands and thousands of Australian families, and in fact other families throughout the world, as a result of that terrible war. In 2016, I had the great privilege of going to Pozières for the 100th anniversary of the battle. And with the help of Dominic Zanardi, the proprietor of the Tommy Cafe, he was able to help me locate roughly where Uncle Harold had fallen, because his body was never recovered. And so I was able to go out there and be the first member of my family to go out there and to stand in close proximity to where Uncle Harold lived, it lies buried under the green fields of France. His body has, as I said, has never been found. And so that was a great opportunity for me to sit and quietly reflect on the great cost of war. In 1979, I myself joined the Royal Australian Navy and eventually joined the submarine squadron. I never joined to go and fight in a war. I joined because I wanted to have a great opportunity to go and see the world, and also to go and get a great trade, which I did. Serving in our military has great costs for people, even in peacetime. In my time, 3 of my friends lost their lives as a reminder of the great cost that people pay, even in peacetime. Chris and I were on Onslow when an incident occurred, and Chris unfortunately lost his life. And 2 other friends, Hugh and Bear, were lost at sea when a submarine dived with them locked out. It was a terrible time for the squadron, and I remember those days with great vividness. When I was the rector of St John's, Gordon, I had the great privilege of being able to dedicate the memorial to all those who had served at HMAS Platypus, at Subbase Platypus. and I was able to dedicate a memorial to those 3 men who had lost their lives in the service of their country during peacetime. For me, as I go and celebrate, or as I go and participate in ANZAC Day, I won't be celebrating anything. I will be remembering my friends, and I will be reconnecting with my submarine mates as we continue to encourage each other and sustain each other as we come to deal with our own demons, which is a result of our service for our country. And so I hope that you will also take a moment to stop and to say thank you for our servicemen and women who so diligently and so bravely serve our country. And also remember that our servicemen and women don't look to go to war. Our government sends the men and women of this nation who serve in the country to war, no one else. And so I do pray that you will also continue to encourage our politicians to be very, very wise in the use of lethal force and in the way in which they deploy the military. The 25th of April, though, is also not just a day to remember ANZAC Day. In the church, it is the celebration of the feast of St. Mark the Evangelist. And in those readings for today, there is the great passages of the resurrection. Mark, in his story, tells the amazing reality of Jesus being raised from the dead. The doom and gloom of Good Friday gives way to the joy of Easter Day. Even though it seems incredulous to the women and to the men, over time they come to understand that Jesus is truly raised from the dead. This has great ramifications for us as we continue to reflect on ANZAC Day. War is one of the greatest blights on our human condition. It is one of the darkest places that we can actually go to. And yet, Jesus, in his death on the cross on Good Friday, is able to take all that terrible part of our human nature and is able to put it to death and is able to raise it to new life on Easter Day. Death is not the end. My friends Chris and Hugh and Bear, who died in the service of their country, die in the hope of the resurrection. Even though they died at very young ages, under the ages of 25, they have great hope that all is not lost because Jesus is raised from the dead. I find this quite extraordinary, that on such an amazing day as St. Mark, the Evangelist Day, the British High Command at that time would have thought to put troops ashore on such a day, a feast day, at the time when most people would have gone to church in those days, not like today. And so it seems to me that we have a great opportunity to not just think about ANZAC Day as a futility of war, which all war is futile, and all war, in my opinion, is a crime. We are also able to give thanks that God is able to overcome all things, even war, in his Son Jesus, and he is able to make it new and transformed by the resurrection. And so as we come to this day to remember ANZAC Day and all those who have served and all those who have lost their lives and all those who continue to suffer from their service, we give thanks that God in his Son Jesus is able to change, transform and renew all things, even the horrible nature and the futility of war. Lest we forget, and the Lord be with you.